Well, welcome, Deb, to the Leaders Who Care series. And I think I know you care, and I know you're a leader who cares. But now we're going to show them basically
Mhm.
that you care. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. We are going to have a great time.
We already are even before this started.
I know. Those pre-chats. You always want to, those are the where you get the juicy details.
Yes, there was no drinking involved, but this one,
No,
but it was
no.
so. But maybe there's a hot toddy at the end or something.
Could be. Could be.
But
It's
best way to start is
mhm,
if you could briefly, that's the keyword in italics, briefly
mhm, mhm.
of not what you do yet or anything like that, but
Right.
a little about where you're from
Mhm,
originally, where you are now,
mhm,
maybe whatever you feel comfortable talking about
mhm,
family, a little bit of history there,
mhm,
maybe something you've never told anybody and you
mhm.
want to reveal it to the world
Ah.
now. That's
Hmm.
always fun too. But share a little bit about
Okay.
Deb.
Great. Great. Well, it's funny when people, where I live now, they say, "Where are you from?" And I say, "Well, I am from Colorado, but I live in Atlanta." And so we've been in Atlanta a little over 13 years. My husband's company transferred us here. They said move or, and we didn't like the or option. So we moved. And it's been great. Atlanta is different. Like it's 13 years, I'm still lost. I'm used to living in Denver where there was a range of mountains, and that was west. And now I'm like, I don't know where I am. Um, and so I grew up in the mountains of Colorado, elevation of over 8,000 feet. I laugh when they say Georgia has mountains. I'm like, no, no, honey, you have foothills.
Exactly.
But yeah, so I grew up at over 8,000 feet. I am an only child. My mother always said she could only tolerate one. And I'm it's kind of like I'm not sure she always tolerated the one, but I married number 8 of 9.
Wow.
So it's always very entertaining when we get together with his family. And I'm so shy that of
Oh, yeah.
course they overwhelm me. Yeah,
Mm.
right. And so I have a great time when we all get together. We've been married over 30 years. No kids, but we have 4 beagles and 2 cats.
Nice.
And so yeah, we always have a very active house.
Are we
You
gonna get
know,
to see any of the Beagles?
they're nope, they are outside having fun. It's above freezing. It's really funny. We had a cold snap here in Atlanta and it got down to freezing. I mean,
I know.
it's been nippy. And so it's the sun's out, so they are outside enjoying that. But yeah, but we show them. And actually, I should say my husband shows them. I sit outside the ring and kibitz. But we have a lot of fun doing that. I sit on the board of directors of the National Beagle Club of America. Isn't that
Oh.
hoity-toity, right? Um, and it's really a lot of fun. We just had our annual
Hoity-toity, huh?
hoity-toity. You haven't heard that one in a long time, I'm
Yeah.
sure. And I was just at our annual meeting, which was great fun. Had a really good time at that outside of the Washington D.C. area. The other board that I am very proud to sit on is the University of Colorado, the Dean's Advisory Board for the College of Arts and Sciences.
Cool.
And that's so interesting because it's the biggest college at the university, so the most students, but it has everything from theater and music all the way up to the aerospace programs. And so it's very, very interesting to sit on that board.
I love that. So you're talking about, he's one of how much your husband is one of how many?
He
Eight?
is 8 of 9.
Okay. So you got some family going there.
Mm-hmm.
What were you like as a kid? What were you like as a teenager? We talked a little bit about it
Ah,
before this and the winters and stuff like that.
yeah,
Were
the
you
the winter, yeah, the winters were hard, but great fun, right? As a kid, you thought it was fantastic to grow up in a place where we had snow pretty much 12 months out of the year. And so that was always great fun. But I was thinking back when I knew you were going to ask this question. I was as a teenager. They could have made a comedy of me, right? I was the gawky, scrawny, definitely scrawny, brainy kid. I was friends with the head cheerleader. So I was on the fringe of the in group,
wow.
but just on the fringe. My mom thought it was a good leadership trait. She's grooming me early, right, to be in sports. And I think that really was a good idea, except no. I
Yeah.
could be dribbling the basketball down and fall, just no reason, right? And so I sat on the bench and watched a lot. But I was of course the band geek, the band nerd, whatever you want to call that. You in very small schools. Now my graduating class had 32, and we were the only school in the county, so that shows you the population of the county. But I learned very early on that I could either fade into the woodwork or I could talk a lot. I was probably the kid that, on my report card says talks too much, won't shut up, all of those various things. But, it does make you kind of stand out. But yeah, it was rough, but it was still fun. I don't know that I would go back. You always talk to people, oh, I'd love to be a teenager again. Nope.
No, it's a hard time of life.
Mhm,
Whatever era
mhm,
you're born in, it's still a hard
mhm,
time of life.
mhm,
Maybe,
mhm.
maybe even harder now than ever for young people,
Oh, yeah.
all the information and
Mhm,
everything that they get.
mhm, mhm.
But that's interesting. And yet you're still friends with the head cheerleader, huh?
I was, and she and I, we've known each other since we were 5. We were texting over the weekend. She still lives in Denver, and I live in Atlanta, and so yeah, we are still very good friends.
Well, there's a
Mhm,
good example of
mhm.
not stereotyping the head cheerleader
Right.
to be
She was
friends.
also extremely smart. And so she was the band geek and all of those things. So, yeah, it was, but yeah, she and I are definitely still very good friends.
Well, that shows the stereotypes are
Mhm,
not to be counted on or used for judgment or stuff like that.
mhm, mhm,
For sure. So you mentioned Colorado. You went to
mhm.
Colorado State. You got your
I
bachelor's
did.
degree
Mhm,
in
mhm,
social science, bachelor of social
mhm,
science, and
mhm,
you got a
mhm,
master's in communications,
mhm,
which apparently you're still working on.
mhm,
And at University of Colorado, you
mhm.
got your MBA.
Right.
Uh,
I like school.
apparently, I mean, but what
Mhm.
were you envisioning for yourself at that point?
So when I was in high school, I wanted to be a defense attorney, right? I was going to be the next
Yeah.
female Matlock. Now, yes, I just gave away my age by talking about that,
There
right?
is did
I
you know
know,
there's
and Kathy Bates is much better at it than I would have been. Um, and but and there were some people who said, hey, that's a good career choice for you because you like to argue. Okay. Um, and but I am very into the baby boomer generation, and it was still frowned upon for girls to go to school to pretty much be anything other than a
Right,
teacher or a nurse or some other nurturing type of,
right.
of role, or to get your MRS degree. And none of that appealed to me. But I did discover I did not want to go to law school. And the funny thing is, I thought, oh, that's a lot more school. Well, I've gone to more school than if I got a JD. But so I ended up with a degree in social science, which you do nothing with. It's like, what is that? And what it meant was I didn't have to take a lot of science classes. And so that was why I got that degree.
There's a positive to everything, I
Yeah.
guess.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And well, I want to start, and then I want to go to
Mm-hmm.
segue to that actually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And let me go back a little bit. Our firm was founded on the premise of our core is about talent and leadership and
Mm-hmm.
impact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You've got a unique background in nonprofit,
Mm-hmm.
all sizes of
Mm-hmm.
corporate clients,
Mm-hmm.
financial services,
Mm-hmm.
government, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And they all seem to have that thread from your communication
Mm-hmm.
studies,
Right.
marketing, PR,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
relations. Can you share one or two experiences you've had and maybe even lean towards which ones might have been inflection points
Mm-hmm.
that stand out for you for both your
Mm-hmm.
career and then
Right.
we'll get into your
Mm-hmm.
personal health too?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, the first time where I really got into doing communications was with the American Cancer Society.
Hmm.
And I'd been working for a wonderful firm that designed computer software for the government. Now, I was the only non PhD person there. I ran the office. And the guys, it was me and the guys, were the people who designed the software. And wonderful folks, but I knew that it was not a long-term career. And so people said, hey, why don't you want to get paid to do what you like to do? And that was a really weird concept. And so I went to work for the American Cancer Society. I was a communications coordinator. So I did newsletters, I did media relations, I did all sorts of things. and discovered that I liked it. And that really was the springboard for then everything that came from there. But I learned so much there that it really was a great way to start my career.
And how did you decide then on your next few opportunities? Because and I actually like when this happens,
Mm-hmm.
you were in different types of
Mm-hmm.
industries, different types
Right.
of
Right.
scenarios.
So the hard part about working for any nonprofit, and especially a big nonprofit, is long hours, short pay.
Hmm.
You know?
Sure.
And as much as I loved what I did think, okay, I don't like working 6 days a week, because frequently we had special events on weekends.
Right.
When I ran committees that had doctors, oncologists, obviously, and they could meet at 7 in the morning, and then you had to go all day and have more committee meetings. I mean, all sorts of things. So I thought, okay, I'm tired of this. And that was when I jumped out of that and kind of thought, okay, let's go into corporate America and see what I can do there.
Hmm. And was there any of those scenarios that like truly stand out? Like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
this was a great experience, or wow,
Yeah.
it led you to something
Mm-hmm.
else
Mm-hmm.
specifically.
I worked for a marketing and PR firm,
Hmm.
and it was very small, but I learned so much there. And one of the big things that I learned was how to charge, right? How much do you charge? Because it's always the bugaboo. And I think it's especially challenging for women. We tend to undervalue ourselves.
Hmm.
But the owner of the firm always operated on the principle of charge what the market will bear. And by that, he meant that if you were working with, say, a nonprofit, you could not charge them as much. But if you were working for, say, a lawyer, a doctor, somebody who charged $500, $600 an hour, if you did not price similarly, then they did not see the value in it.
Right.
And we also never told people publicly our pricing. Now this was before and at the early stages of the internet, so we didn't have pricing online, but we really did tailor it to each client.
Yeah, it's amazing when because I had some circumstance when I got actually turned down my dream job to work for a pro
Mm-hmm.
hockey team to come down to the States to be an executive director of a global nonprofit,
Mm-hmm.
leadership
Mm-hmm.
development nonprofit, and I never understood why people get paid less and work more either.
Right. Right.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Well,
so
and it was funny because, about the point when I was at ACS, they were really discovering that if they wanted, not they, any type of big nonprofit or small, if they wanted quality leaders to be their CEO, to be their CFO, CMO, all of those various things, they had to pay, for the most part, what they could get in corporate America. And that was kind of eye-opening, because we all thought, oh, it should be your passion and you should do it for free. Well, that's good, but your mortgage can't be paid with that.
yeah, that's a big problem. I know
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you can't go to the supermarket and say,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but what about this?
Right. Right.
And,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so I mean, you have an interesting journey, which we'll come to some of the stuff you're doing recently, but
Mm-hmm.
I still want to know, was there any specific inflection points that led to your purpose, your passion to positively impact others?
Mm-hmm. I it was actually probably more when I was little. My parents brought me up to believe that you gave back, in whatever it was. I was a Girl Scout from as early as you could be a Girl Scout back at that time, and just kind of all sorts of things. So it was always key to be volunteering, to be helping, to be of service to others. That was probably not the phrasing that they used, way back when, but but every place I worked, now obviously the American Cancer Society, that was all about helping people, but even with the other companies that I worked with, it was still, how could we do that? The big corporation I worked for at the time I worked for it, it was called ING, which is, it was a Dutch company. So that's an acronym. It's International Group. And now it has become Voya. There's been several iterations since then. But when I
Yeah.
worked there, they were the seventh seventh largest public corporation in the world. So big, big, big. American Express was the only bigger financial company than we were. So we were finance and insurance. But one of the primary roles, I was the head of corporate communications for our area in Denver. But one of my main roles was our philanthropic efforts. How were we giving back as a company? And we had a hefty budget. I mean, this was 20 years ago, and the budget was $1 million. And if I wanted more for something specific, then we could conceivably get it. But it was just so important because we knew how important it was. Like I said, 20 years ago. Boy, that seems like a long time ago, right? But it was also very important to our employees that they worked for a company that gave back. And so we would petition our employees and ask, what did you want? What was important to them? And and we tried to do that. It was really just something that was extremely important to our employees. And I think that probably is the biggest thing that came forward out of all of it was, how can you be giving back always? Now you still got to make money, but how can you be giving back?
Well, why that's so important, and why it's at the core of what we do at Fifth Element
Mm-hmm.
is,
Mm-hmm.
when we represent clients, we represent them as leaders who care
Mm-hmm. Right.
about their employees,
Mm-hmm.
financial, physical, and
Mm-hmm.
mental well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
and that making money is a good thing,
Mm-hmm.
and having purpose is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do
Right.
both. In fact, it's
Mm-hmm.
better for business to have
Mm-hmm.
that.
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It just started getting more refined
Mm-hmm.
as we went on,
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
some businesses thought, but then there was a period in business where they thought that's a bunch of crap.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right. Make money, must make money.
exactly, and
Mm-hmm.
that's it. But
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't last good for long term, and
Mm-hmm.
keeping the right talent,
Right.
and things
Right.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm fascinated then how you went on and became probably somebody needed an agent at that point, because you were doing a show here, and you're doing
Mm-hmm.
podcasts and you're doing all sorts of stuff. But you're also the founder of Trying Not to Die
Mm-hmm.
Live.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Live, because
Live,
we're
sorry, not
living,
to die,
right? That's
live.
the easy way to remember that. Mm-hmm.
Yes, unique title.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I'm going to quote you specific, where you say you specifically quote, provide high-level guidance for leaders who want to maintain
Mm-hmm.
their executive presence
Mm-hmm.
and their decision-making authority
Mm-hmm.
while managing the
Mm-hmm.
complex realities of cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, share how that happened.
So, a little over 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. Went through several different uh, diagnoses and things like that. But ultimately, my diagnosis was and still is stage 4 triple positive metastatic breast cancer. Like, right? Because stage 4 is not considered curable. So I ended up with multiple complications from the treatment. And there were 3 times that my husband was told I was not going to make it. There was one time where I remember hearing the doctors out in the hall arguing over how fast I was going to die that day. And I was like, excuse me, I get to vote. Hello, hello. Um, and and since then I've also had 2 other cancer diagnoses, unrelated to the breast cancer diagnosis. And I'm still in current treatment. I go in every 21 days and have treatment. But I founded my own company, Wise Women Communications, 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. And the entire time, for the most part, I continued working. And it was very important to me just to have something to think about, right? As opposed to, oh, poor me. Oh, right. I have a deadline. I have clients that need me. But that brought up how do you tell your clients? Do you tell your clients? How do you tell the people who work with you?
Right.
All of these various things. And it's harder as the business owner, as the executive, because first of all, we're the leader, right? Ooh, we have to be in charge, and we're out of control. You're kind of at the whim of all sorts of other things. And everybody feels that when they get a cancer diagnosis. The lack of control is definitely something. But we're used to being in control as that business leader. So now what do we do when we're not? And then the other thing is, we don't want to tell anybody because they're going to think we can't do our job. And so how then do we deal with our health, our mental health, while still keeping our business running. Because that I think is one of the biggest challenges is how the heck do we do that? Obviously you can take a leave of absence, all sorts of things, but sometimes you can't do that. I could not. Now, could I, excuse me, could I have stopped my business? Sure, but I didn't want to do that. And so it becomes a big challenge as you're going through this process.
Yeah, did you ever wonder, you started out at the Cancer Society.
I know. Well, and way back when I worked for an oncologist, I was his office staff. And so I tell people, I know just enough to be dangerous, right? When I
Right.
looked onto my online chart and the word metastatic was there, I'd been told my cancer had not spread.
Hmm.
But my online chart said metastatic, and I knew exactly what that word meant. That was not the good word. you know?
Yeah.
um, and so, yeah, maybe we were laying the groundwork for this all along.
Don't know what it is, but it's funny how
Mhm,
threads work in
mhm,
life, and
mhm,
things happen, and whether you believe things happen for a reason or not,
mhm,
it's a matter of how you deal
mhm,
with them,
mhm,
and things like that. So you coach people
mhm.
on that, right?
Right. Mhm.
And I would guess to say that laughter is probably a good part of it.
Of course it is. And there's several reasons for the laughter. The first is there are actual physical benefits of laughing.
Right.
It changes chemicals in your body. The strange thing is it lowers your blood pressure.
Mhm.
And it really does just make changes in your body. They have done studies where even fake laugh, the ha 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 ha,
Absolutely.
your brain doesn't know that that's not a real laugh.
100%.
Right. And so, you can do that. And it's also, it's not fun. I mean, I've, because of the complications, because of all sorts of things, I've had over 30 surgeries. Ick, uck, yuck, right? But at the same point, I see the toll that it takes on staff. And that really did start when I worked for the oncologist. Now he would not work with children as patients. They had to be adults because he said, I can't do it. I just cannot work with children. And of course, 25, 30 years ago, the outcome of childhood cancer was not good. They've made such excellent strides now. Um, but yeah, so I try and laugh as much as I possibly can. Are there days where I have a pity party? Of course. That's human nature. But I also try and make my medical team laugh also. My kidney doctor, that's an offshoot of all of this stuff, as I now have bad kidneys. Um, she told me one time, she said, did you ever wonder why you're the last appointment of the day? And I said, no, I just figured you were booked. And she said, no, I've told them you have to be the last appointment of the day. And I said, oh, it's because I talk too much and throw you off schedule. And she laughed and she said, well, there is that, but no, I want you to be my last patient so you can make me laugh.
It's so beautiful because I had another lady on our leadership care, and a number of people that have had cancer, and
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
she said it was good for her
right. Mm-hmm,
to realize that the nurses and doctors that were treating her were also human, and they needed to
mm-hmm,
laugh also, and they
mm-hmm,
needed to feel
right.
good too.
Mm-hmm,
And let's face it, what comes, it's a circle. It's the circle
mm-hmm,
of life. If
right.
you make them
Mm-hmm,
happy,
mm-hmm.
it comes right
Right. Yeah.
back.
If they're feeling better when they go to treat me, I remember one time one of the surgeries I was going in for, I am like I am right now until they knock me out. I am jibber jabber, jibber jabber. And I was laying there on the table, all hooked up, all these various things, and jibber jabbering at, everybody. And I heard one of the nurses say, oh dear, she sounds like she's so nervous. And I said, honey, if I can make y'all laugh, it's going to go better for me. And that really was the thought process is, how can we make them laugh? Now, I'm not one of those that dances, and I know that's not me, but if I can just kind of lift their mood a little bit, I'm going to lift their mood.
And you're right, how it affects people. My middle son
Mm-hmm,
is an actor, and he's had to
mm-hmm,
learn how to do laughs and emotions and
mm-hmm,
whatnot, obviously, and
mm-hmm,
acting well. And
right.
your
Mm-hmm,
brain visualization, all
mm-hmm,
that stuff, your
mm-hmm,
brain doesn't know it's not
mm-hmm,
real.
right.
So it goes for it. Well,
Mm-hmm,
good for you. I mean, that's
mm-hmm,
it's amazing thing our minds, how we can
Hmm.
kind of make things happen
Hmm.
in some ways, and sometimes we can't understand
Hmm.
why things happen,
Hmm.
um,
Right.
but but then you
Hmm.
deal with them type of deal.
Right.
Um, I got a couple more questions,
Hmm.
because in LA we say you got to keep them wanting more so that we'll be able
Of
to do
course.
no, but because we can do a sequel, that's the way why
Hmm.
we do it.
Hmm.
So right now they say the fourth industrial revolution is
Hmm.
about AI and
Hmm.
tech, and it's going to
Hmm.
probably the industry it's going to impact the most is
Hmm.
healthcare,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
hopefully positively in
Hmm.
a great way. But the fifth is humanity.
Hmm.
Um, in this fast and furious world that we have
Hmm.
with AI and everything, um, and um, and what you want, and just what's going on,
Hmm.
and with healthcare and
Hmm.
so on and so forth. Um, what do you see ahead for you? What are you thinking? What do you
Hmm.
envision?
Well, I agree that the next revolution is going to be humanity, and I think that's in going to be in large part because of AI. It is a great, fabulous tool. I mean, that's how my cancer was diagnosed. The computer saw it, and the human eye couldn't. And
Mm.
so you're seeing that happen with so many things, where the computers are catching things, and early diagnosis is obviously the very best thing that you can do. But the computers are not human. They can't have empathy. I don't care what, sorry, Hollywood says.
Sorry.
That they just can't do that. Now, I don't know, maybe someday they will be programmed to do that. And the second one calls me Hal, I'm really going to be freaked out. I use Chat GPT all the time, I asked it to name itself, and so it did. And I swear it flirts with me. But it still is missing that vital piece. Maybe it's the soul, maybe it's the heart.
Right.
And I think we're going to come back to saying we can't just be cut and dry and, do, everything in a row. We have to have that humanity in order to function. And so I think that's going to be the really important thing is how do we keep that going?
Yeah, I agree. I actually think AI has the potential capability, if we do it right, to make us happier
Mm-hmm.
than we've ever
It
been.
certainly saves me lots of time. So that makes me happy.
Well, there you go. So happiness then. I got one last question in this
Mm-hmm.
part.
Mm-hmm.
COVID happened like 5, 6 years ago. Some people still think it feels like yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we're already at the end of
Mm-hmm.
2025, which is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I have a feeling I know the answer, but what are you most grateful for and what are you most hopeful for?
I tell people I'm not looking up at 6 feet of dirt. So that really makes me happy. Every once in a while I'll have somebody that they don't quite understand that, and you kind of have to explain it to them. But I am happy to still be here and still be alive. And I think that is obviously, what I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for all of the wonderful people that this has brought into my life. That's kind of strange. I am hopeful that just in general, the world will calm down. It's I,
Yeah.
I've been around the block enough times to know, things usually do right themselves, but you have a lot of stress and a lot of tension, and I do try to not pay attention to that. I mean, I know what's going on in the world. I have friends that are on furlough. I know people who weren't able to make flights, all of those various things. But I don't dwell on it because it's not good for your mental or your physical health.
Right.
And so hopefully things will calm, and 2026 will kind of, what is it, in what they used to say, out like a lion, in like a lamb. I know that's like May or something, April, but let's have 2025 do that. Out like a lion, in like a lamb.
I second the motion. Well, I'm grateful that I have a new friend.
Yay.
Yeah, and I'm grateful that you are a
Mm-hmm.
leader who cares. I'm actually
Mm-hmm.
grateful and hopeful that because you are a leader who cares and making an impact for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
but also for others around you. So thanks for that,
Well,
and
thank
thanks for
you.
sharing, your vulnerability, if you will, and whatnot. Because I think we all are starting to learn that vulnerability and authenticity are
Mm-hmm.
actually real positive
Mm-hmm.
things, and I think people
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that in people. So thanks for being who you are.
Thank you. And thank you for this honor. It has been wonderful talking with you.
My privilege.